That Lass of LOWRIE'S by Francis Hodgson Burnett. Chapter 23. The night school gained ground steadily. The number of scholars was constantly on the increase, so much so indeed that Grace had his hands inconveniently full. "They have dull natures, these people," said the Reverend Harold, "and in the rare cases where they are not dull, they are stubborn. Absolutely. I find it quite trying to face them at times, and it is not my fortune to find it difficult to reach people as a rule. They seem to have made up their minds beforehand to resent what I am going to say. It is most unpleasant. Grace has been working among them so long that, I suppose, they are used to his methods. He has learnt to place himself on a level with them, so to speak. I notice they listen to and seem to understand him. The fact is, I have an idea that sort of thing is Grace's forte. He is not a brilliant fellow, and will never make any particular mark, but he has an odd perseverance which carries him along with a certain class. Wriggin suits him, I think. He has dropped into the right groove." Jud Bates and the best terrier in Wriggin were among the most faithful attendants. The lad's fancy for a niece had extended to Grace. Grace's friendly toleration of Nib had done much for him. Nib always appeared with his master, and his manner was as composed and decorous as if rats were subjects foreign to his meditations. His part it was to lie at Jud's feet, his nose between his paws, his eyes twinkling sagaciously behind his shaggy eyebrows, while, occasionally, as a token of approval, he wagged his tail. Once or twice during a fitful and not untroubled slumber, he had been known to give vent to his feelings in a sharp bark, but he never failed to awaken immediately, with every appearance of the deepest abasement and confusion at the unconscious transgression. During a visit to the rectory one day, Jud's eyes fell upon a book which lay on our niece's table. It was full of pictures, illustrations depicting the adventures and vicissitudes of a fortunate unfortunate, whose desert island has been the paradise of thousands, whose goatskin habiliments have been more worthy of envy than kingly purple, whose airy cap has been more significant of monarchy than any crown. For the man who wore these savage garments has reigned supreme in realms of romance, known only in their first beauty to boyhood's ecstatic belief. Jud put out his hand and, drawing the gold and crimson snare towards him, opened it. When our niece came into the room, she found him poring over it. His ragged cap lay with Nib at his feet. His face was aglow. His hair was pushed straight up on his head. Both elbows were resting on the table. He was spelling his way laboriously but excitedly through the story of the footprint on the sand. Our niece waited a moment and then spoke. "Jud," she said, "when you can read, I will give you Robinson Crusoe." In less than 6 months she was called upon to redeem her promise. This occurred a few weeks after Craddock had been established at the lodge at the Averland Gates. The day our niece gave Jud his well-earned reward, she had a package to send to Mrs. Craddock, and when the boy came for the boot, she employed him as a messenger to the park. "If you will take these things to Mrs. Craddock, Jud, I shall be much obliged," she said, "and please tell her that I will drive out to see her tomorrow." Jud accepted the mission readily. With Nib at his heels and Robinson Crusoe under his arm, 3 miles were a trivial matter. He trudged off, whistling with keen delight. As he went along, he could fortify himself with an occasional glance at the hero and his man Friday. What would he not have sacrificed at the prospect of being cast with Nib upon a desert island? How Sammy sat in the chimney corner smoking his pipe and making severe mental comments upon the conduct of Parliament then in session, of whose erratic proceedings he was reading an account in a small but highly seasoned newspaper. Sammy shook his head ominously over the peppery reports, but feeling it as well to reserve his opinions for his select audience at the Crown allowed Mrs. Craddock to perform her household tasks unmolested. Hearing Judd at the door, he turned his head. "It's you, is it?" he said. "Tha can come in. What's Broughton?" "Summat for the missus from Rectory," Judd answered, producing his parcel. "Miss Annie's sent me wi' it." "Tak it to th' owd lass then. Tak it to her. Thou'lt find her in back kitchen." Having done as he was bidden, Judd came back again to the front room. Mrs. Craddock had hospitably provided him with a used sandwich of bread and cheese, and Nib followed him with expectant eyes. "Sit thee down, lad," said Sammy condescendingly. "Sit thee down. Thou's getting a walk afore and behind thee. What boot's getting under the arm?" Judd regarded the volume with evident pride and exultation. "It's Robinson Crusoe, that theer is," he answered. Sammy shook his head dubiously. "Dunno know as I ever heard on him. He's noan scripter, is he?" "No," said Judd, repelling the insinuation stoutly. "He isna." "Hand him over. Let's ha' a look at him." Judd advanced. "There's pictures in it," he commented eagerly. "There's one at front. That theer," and pointing to the front piece, "that theer's him." Sammy gave it a sharp glance, then another, and then held the book at arm's length, regarding Robinson's goatskin habiliments over the rims of his spectacles. "Well, I'm dommed," he exclaimed. "I'm dommed if I wouldn't ha' liked to see that chap in Regan. What's the felly getting on?" "He's dressed in goatskins. He were cast upon a desert island, and had nowt else to wear. I thought he must have been reduced in circumstances, or he'd never ha' turned out in that rig, less he thought more of comfort than appearances. What were he a-doing a-casting his soul on a desert island? Were he writing th' upper story?" "He was shipwrecked," triumphantly. "The sea drifted him to shore, and he built hissen a hut, and getting goats and birds and all sorts, and it's the gradeliest boot they ever seed. Miss Annis gave it me." "Has she read it hersen?" "Aye, it were her as tell't me most on it." Sammy turned the volume over and looked at the back of it, at the edges of the leaves, at the gilt-lettered title. "I wouldna be surprised," he observed with oracular amiability. "I wouldna be surprised if that's the case, or there's summat in it." "That as I've telled thee's nowt to rest on it," answered Judd in enthusiasm. "There's a man called Friday, and a lot of fellies as eat each other. Cannibals, they call them." "Look there," interposed Craddock, his curiosity and interest getting the better of him. "Sit thee down and read a bit. That's something as I never heard on. Cannibals and the like. Pick thee the place and let's hear summat about the cannibals, if thou's another time to dinner more." Judd needed no second invitation. Sharing the general opinion that old Sammy was a man of mark, he could not help feeling that Crusoe was complimented by his attention. He picked out his place, as his era had advised him, and plunged into the details of the cannibal feast with pride and determination. Though his elocution may have been of a style peculiar to boyhood, and his pronunciation occasionally startling in its originality, still Sammy gathered the gist of the story. He puffed at his pipe so furiously that the foreign gentleman's turbaned head was emptied with amazing rapidity, and it was necessary to refill it 2 or 3 times. He rubbed his corduroy knees with both hands. Occasionally he slapped one of them in the intensity of his interest, and when Judd stopped he could only express himself in his usual emphatic formula. "Well, I'm dommed. And tha says as the chap's name were Robinson?" "Aye, Robinson Crusoe." "Well, I mun say as I'd a like to ha' known him. I did know a man by t' name of Robinson once, but it couldn't ha' been him, for he were no much a chap. If he'd ha' been cast on a desert island, he wouldn't have had the gumption to do all that theer. Jem Robinson couldn't ha'. It couldn't ha' been him, and besides, he couldn't ha' writ it out, as that theer felly's done." There was a pause in which Craddock held his pipe in his hand reflectively, shaking his head once more. "Cannibals and the like too," he said. There's a sort of things as a man doesn't hear on. Why, I never heard of cannibals mysen, and I amna considered ignorant by most of folk. Then as Judd rose to go, "Art thou for going?" he asked. "Well, I mun say as I'd like to hear summat more about Robinson, but if thou mun go, thou mun, I suppose. Say thee here, could thou come again, and bring him with thee?" "I might, I dunna mind the walk." "Then thee do it," getting up to accompany him to the gates, "and I'll gi' thee a copper now and then to pay thee. There's summat in a book o' that sort. Come thee again as soon as thou can, and we'll go on with the cannibals." "What's the lad been reading to thee, Sammy?" asked Mrs. Craddock, entering the room after Judd had taken his departure. "A bit o' literature. I dunna know as thou'd know what the book were if I telled thee. Thou never were much of hand at literature. He were reading Robinson Crusoe." "Not a tract, surely?" "Nay, that it werena. It were the dairy o' a man who were cast upon a desert island in the midst of cannibals." "The dairy?" "Nay, lass, nay," testily. "Not in the sense you mean. The dairy were o' the literary sort. He were a literary mon." "Cannibals and the like," Sammy said to himself several times during the evening. "Cannibals and the like. There's a power of things in the universe." He took his pipe after supper and went out for a stroll. Mental activity made him restless. The night was a bright one. A yellow harvest moon was rising slowly above the tree-tops and casting a mellow light upon the road stretching out before him. He passed through the gates and down the road at a leisurely pace, and had walked 100 yards or so when he caught sight of two figures approaching him, a girl and a man, so absorbed that they evidently had not noticed him. The girl was of light and youthful figure, and the little old red shawl she wore over her head was pushed aside and showed curly hair lying upon her brow. It was plain that she was uneasy or frightened, for, as soon as she was near enough, her voice reached him in a tone of frightened protest. "Oh, dunna," she was saying, "I canna bear it. I dunna want to hear you, and I willna. You might ha' let me be. I dunna believe you. Let me go home. I'll never come again." And then she broke out crying. Craddock looked after them as they passed out of sight. "There's trouble there," he said eagerly. "A working lass and a mon in gentleman's clothes. Dumb such like chaps, say I. What would they think if working men had come middling with their lasses? I wish I had more time to see the wench's face."